welcome. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Vinayak, CEO of DSCI, Manish Sehgal, Partner Risk Advisory, Deloitte, to another episode of the Good Company Videos. What better topic could we have today for this discussion than privacy? The privacy triad from an individual, industry, and innovation perspective. I have a couple of questions lined up for you, and I'm going to pass them on, get your industry expert views, and Manish from a privacy perspective. What are your views on privacy from an individual perspective or from a general citizen's perspective today?
Yeah, so if you look at the way digitization happening, right, we are seeing for our individual use also we are using all of those applications and all of those services in digital way. Plus the enterprises also are looking at digitization means improving the experience of the customer, improving their own productivity, and also trying to create new possibility for them basically. So while that is happening, so data that is getting processed is a personal data that is getting processed in this entire ecosystem basically, and there is a possibility of harming an individual the way the data is being used basically. So those concerns of individuals are definitely becoming now significant, and they are getting aggravated as well, because sometimes that data can be used to do a significant harm to the end data subject basically. So as a society, people are certainly getting benefit of digitization, but on the other hand, they are worried about how the data is being used and misused basically. So that's the concern that we see, and that's why it's getting reflected into the constitutional side, because the Supreme Court are underlining data privacy as a fundamental right, and then we are also looking at now a new regulation that would be coming now shortly to take care of the data protection requirements of and taking care of the rights of the individual actually.
Absolutely. No, building on that, Manish, see from a common citizen's perspective, would you like to add something to that, like a general usual citizen who's not very aware maybe?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much, Vinayak, for joining us, and thanks, Ashish, for getting this organized. I totally agree with what Vinayak is saying. I think if you would have asked this question to me a decade back, I would have had a very different answer versus what I'm going to give today. And probably if you ask this question to me next 2 years, it'll be very different. Privacy as a topic, Ashish, definitely is gaining momentum. And as Vinayak said, that the more digitization is proliferating into our country, the more adaptation is happening. People are realizing importance of data. But has it reached its optimum state? Answer is no. There's definitely a way for us to go ahead. And one of the most successful ways for any privacy bill to come would be the awareness among the society. So just to answer your question, what's the reaction of public? I would say it's gaining. People are trying to understand. Few people may get confused with the topic of security. Few people may believe OTP non-sharing is a privacy aspect, which it's debatable. I mean, I'll not go there, but I think people are realizing importance of data and privacy specifically, that the data is of my own use and I have to decide. That culture is adapting, is growing, and it will definitely take a way ahead. So that's really what I thought of complementary to what Vinayak said, Ashish.
Now, do you think people realize the difference, or there is an education and awareness required maybe on the government parts or bodies like us or the...
Yeah, so certainly, because see, there is a distinct idea, concept of a privacy right. And when you say privacy is a fundamental right, means people need to understand what we mean by that right basically. So as Manish talked about, it may get equated to security, but security is one principle of many other principles that you need to adhere in terms of privacy right. So you need to think about, when we talk about privacy, we talk about the questions which is going beyond typical security discussion, right? Security, we always talk about need to know basis, but privacy, we talk about largely why you are collecting data. We are asking those ethical, moral questions in terms of privacy, and if the purpose doesn't serve collecting data, then probably that collection of data may not be legitimate in nature basically. And then there are various different subject matters of privacy that are now evolved as a part of the privacy discussion and expectation basically. And they need definitely quite a good effort in terms of making people aware about what do you mean by privacy and how that is distinct from the security.
And if you hold that thought, my next question is actually is akin to the same point. Voice of consumer, voice of customer, there are so many of these surveys and all, and data collection has been an integral part of that, because that is how you get feedback for organizations too. Now, how do you see this becoming a challenge in addressing some of those surveys?
Yeah, so one part of the the digital economy is the way you monetize the services and capabilities and product you have, right? And even for that matter, conventional product also needs to reach out to the customer in more targeted way, basically. So when we talk about creating new possibility, then you are talking about reaching out to the customer to know them better, know their preferences better, understand them better, basically, and based on their context, probably provide them whatever product service that you want to sell to them, basically. But many of these things, like many of these possibility or product or services you will selling, so many of those will now get reutilized because of each of those things that will require the personal data to be collected, which should get reutilized to match to the expectation of privacy which is getting set up by this regulation, basically. So going forward, every time you are engaging with the consumer to get their data and processing their data, you need to ask those questions of privacy, basically. That's what things would change because of the obligations liability coming from privacy.
There is no other way to find out the pulse of the consumer or the customer without getting one of these surveys. Now, where do you see the technical challenge coming in from, maybe if a bill is passed or from a privacy concern? Do you think that will hamper the way these surveys are done, or what are your views on that?
I would say it's a bit of a premature question, but I'll still make an attempt because a lot depends on what the bill comes out, right? But let us understand, Ashish, who is consumer? You are consumer, I am consumer, Vinayak is consumer, right? I have noticed often, maybe about a few years back, there used to be some people with schemes that you please provide your details, and this is a coupon that we provide to you, and we will end up giving all our personal details to it.
Especially at the fuel pumps.
Fuel pumps, right? Very recently, I observed, I was filling up the fuel tank, and I observed the rejection ratio was much higher. People were not very open to share their data because they realize that it is not the right thing to do. What I'm trying to relate to this answer is this: it goes back to the first question that you asked. What is the general, privacy building up senses within the people? So I have seen that it's getting a bit better against what it was earlier. But I think Vinayak really made the right point. I don't think it is about stopping the collation of the data or understanding the preferences of the consumer. As long as those are being taken with, let's say, the right consent of a consumer, and it is being used for the purposes for it is defined, nothing changes. The problem is this: when I take Ashish Viji's data or Manish Saigal's data or Vinayak's data and I start using it for something else that you may not have signed up for, that is where the problem is, and that is where the bill is likely to pose some restrictions. So it won't be a hindrance as long as it is done rightfully. Secondly, if I have given a data for my for personal purposes, and if the organization which is collecting the data, they may want to anonymize it, and they want to generalize the understanding that we interviewed or we collected the data of a gender this, of an age gap
personas,
this. It personas, it anonymizes the data. Nothing stops that. The problem is that if you start going beyond, you start leveraging the personal data for something else, that is a practice which is likely to change and maybe for good.